Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Skiing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Well, we've got a national personality and a former national team member and a former pro skier, Brenda Buglione, who's on with us today. And Brenda's going to talk about all kinds of things ski racing. She is one of the foremost television personalities in this sport. She has a program called SnowMotion. I think you're going to enjoy the interview. And thank God for Mother Nature. We'll be back in a second.
To be a good skier, you need to be able to separate your lower and upper body. Your lower body is your ankle, knee, hip, and your upper body is your core, shoulders, head. The reason why you need lower and upper body separation is that you need to get this downhill ski up on edge. And the only way to do that is with your ankle, knee, hip into the hill and your upper body separating it and putting it down the hill. We need this drive down the hill to counter the forces that we created on our skis. If I don't separate my lower and upper body and I'm a straight line, I don't have any force or power on my skis. So I'm going to slide my turns. We want to carve our turns. And the ski is a tool. We want to put force on that edge. The ski is made with camber. When I put my ski up on edge and I bend it, it has energy. If I don't bend that ski, I'm just going to be sliding it around. When I bend it, I'm going to create energy out of that turn and it's going to release me forward. But the only way I can bend that ski is if I separate my lower and upper body, countering the forces that are created under that downhill edge. So remember, if you want to set that edge and make clean carved turns, especially on the steeps, you need to separate your lower and upper body. Get that crunch right there, and you'll make beautiful carved turns.
Welcome back. We're talking with probably one of the most recognizable ski. I'm trying to think of what word I would use, but certainly a recognizable face of the sport with SnowMotion. We're talking with Brenda Buglione from Vail, Colorado. And if you don't know what SnowMotion is, you haven't spent much time on a pair of skis. And we're going to talk about your program, and we're going to talk about some other stuff. But you're a four-time All-American of Colorado, former U.S. team member, and certainly one of the great women pro skiers in the day. And we're going to talk about your family. But here's my question: your husband Jeff, was a Green Mountain Academy skier. You were Burke Mountain. You have three young folks in the house who are all fist racers. So here's my easiest question: who's the best racer in the house?
Oh, wow. Well, that's changed as time has evolved. I think at one point I was, and then Jeff has definitely surpassed me in the back rolls of Vail over any bumps for sure. But then now, after my oldest went to Dartmouth College and raced for them, and my daughter raced for Colby College, now it's my youngest that he's the fastest right now, by far. I think of all of us.
But none of them have the credentials that you had in your career. So is it looking up to it, or is it kind of a nudge when the season's over and spring skiing? Is it still that they still got to watch mom get down the hill?
Well, I think they still take my advice. I mean, if I want to give a technical encouragement, they will still listen to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool. You've been married 31 years. You guys as a family moved all the way to Vail from what was against, the East Coast where you kind of grew up. And you've spent this time and you kind of made a decision as a family to move to Vail. And when did that happen? And what was the impetus for moving out there?
We were in Denver at that point, and my oldest was in 5th grade and going into middle school. And I was going to move to the mountains because you couldn't, he was just a weekend warrior, but you couldn't really ski during the week living in Denver. So I'm going to move to Vail. And then my husband decided to make a job change and start his own business in Vail so that he could come too. He worked for a company called Liberty Media in Denver, and then started his own business in Vail, running ultra high net worth family offices. So his office is in Avon, and now we could all live together and the kids could ski every day. So our dream came true.
Let me take you back to your career. What you obviously were a four-time All-American, but when you started out at Burke Mountain, what was your specialty? Are you a tech skier or speed skier?
Definitely tech. Yeah, tech. Even though I did race 5 World Cup downhills, which is, my knees were stuck together and I was afraid all the time. But I was much better in slalom and giant slalom. And my best World Cup result was a 13th in slalom.
You also skied on the Pro Tour, and at a time when Pro Tour was struggled a little bit, especially the sponsors were just not there. We had Kerry Adgate on to start the season, and we talked a little bit about you'd win a race and you had enough, like the early days of golf, you had enough money to get to the next
one.
Yeah, it wasn't a lucrative business like it may be now, or even in other sports. I don't think that was, the intent. It's just one of those kinds of things. What did you like about the Pro Tour?
The Pro Tour actually was a great stepping stone for me into what I'm doing now. And I feel that if the Pro Tour didn't exist, I don't know if I would be here running a television show and being a ski celebrity for corporate events. It was just so, I didn't go on to win a World Cup and be on the A team, but I was on the B team. But it just allowed you to continue your racing career. And it was just so much fun to be a racer, and you wanted to work on your skiing. And it was just a vehicle for us to, continue to compete and enjoy the sport. But for me, it was also, I was able to get a sponsorship from HBO. My degree in school was exercise physiology, and I worked in New York City at HBO in the summer. And on the bike next to me was the marketing person. And I said, would you sponsor me on the Pro Tour? I will wear HBO on my head and in my knees. And he said, yes. And then when I met with him, I said, I can also ski with your clients and affiliates. And that just took off. And they paid me a lot, to wear a headband. And so it was really a stepping stone for me to start working and doing corporate skiing. And then when I stopped being a pro racer, I thought, how am I going to continue all my corporate events when I had no credibility as a ski racer? And so then I started doing ski tips for a local channel. And then I developed my television show, and I eventually bought it from Fox Sports. And now I own it. And so now I can, it's in 96 million households across the country now.
As a 20-year-old exercise physiology major, what did you see when you were at that point? What did you see what you might have been at 30 before the ambitious opportunity going to HBO had that, that great right-hand turn to do those things? Can I assume that you're pretty ambitious anyway?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great. But what about exercise physiology was the, what attracted you to that?
Well, because I, just did everything in my power to get stronger and be in the best shape I could be for a ski racer. Okay. So that's why it was so interesting. And I used to teach ski conditioning classes, and I just love to work out. And then this was, being educated at everything that I, could promote about doing all the exercises correctly and training correctly. So that inspired me because I loved it so much. And then, I was just so fortunate that HBO became one of my sponsors and hired me to ski with their affiliates. And really that fear of, gosh, if I retire from pro racing, why would they continue to hire me? And then I thought, I'm going to start a television show and to help my credibility. And I started small with ski tips and did a pilot, and then convinced, it was Telecommunications Inc. in Denver, to look at the show. And then they got involved and helped me produce it for a few years. And it was just on the Fox Sports Rocky Mountain division. And then it went national. So it was always a lot of work, but I loved it.
In terms of exercise physiology, I have a degree in kinesiology. So the study of movement and body movement in sports is really important. It really is. And there's a lot of overlap between sports. And we're in this world where we do a very poor job of promoting more than one sport for kids. Everybody a kid plays one sport, he should play 3, or at least play 2 in tiddlywinks, just something different, so it doesn't become a full-time gear. We know what the federation, and we know what the numbers of burnout are with kids now. We know that it's at a high rate, so that's part of that process. I want the exercise physiology aspect is obviously got to be very helpful in the tips that you do, because really skiing is
Yeah.
mechanical. And if you don't understand the mechanical part, what's the point?
100%, 100%. And I love my ski tips because I feel that it's a combination of what I've been taught from my great coaches for my whole life, and a mixture of the kinesiology and the forces and yeah, my experience, what works for me, um, what I know puts the force on my downhill ski and gives me confidence, and where should my hands be, and all that stuff it's all connected.
All right. Well, I want to take it back to briefly about the family. You obviously moved to Vail. You're going to put 3 kids into the ski world because obviously you and your husband both ski race. Describe you as a mother, as a ski racing mother.
Mm,
I'm asking the question because when a family makes that kind of decision, this isn't like we're moving to an area where you're going to play baseball, you're going to ski, and that's a huge decision. And obviously, you both came out of ski academies, which meant that your parents were serious about ski racing. So it's a real strong thread within the family unit. Is that fair to say?
yes. And I think, I mean, that's what our sport needs too, is that the kids of ski racers, they need to nurture them and get them involved, because that's where we're getting the future racers, just because it is a difficult sport if you don't know anything about it, to bring up a ski racer.
I asked the question because tending to the garden in every sport, especially skiing, is important. In Region 3 here for USSA, for CUSA, 8-10 years ago, we had 450 kids in the region. We have 150 now, and they're just not showing up. And it's because of you can blame the pandemic, and you can certainly blame cost and ski areas that don't necessarily want to host those kinds of opportunities. But there has to be some promotion of that sport, and then tending to the garden for it to grow. That's the only way it works.
Yeah, 100%. It has to grow. I think the skiers become skiers when they ski with their families and their parents, and the kids are introduced to it when their parents have passion, so they bring their kids along. And sometimes my youngest, he loves soccer, and sometimes wishes he was what's the guy's name, Ronaldo.
Right.
He thinks he could be a Messi, in soccer, and be famous. We're skiing, we're not going to get famous, and we're not going to make a lot of money. But we said, we grew up in Vail, we're skiers. But anyway, he's really confident, this boy. But anyway, but I think the future of skiing is because of the families, because the parents love it and they bring their kids along and introduce them to a sport and have fun as a family. And that's important.
I'm sure you're a supportive mother, but you weren't a helicopter parent, were you, by chance?
No. I mean, I'm sure I've been called annoying. I mean, because I'm a know-it-all, but no, I wasn't. Was in really into her schooling. She's biology, concentration, neuroscience, double major econ. And I go, Kate, don't. She's like, I'm missing training because of labs. And I'm like, change your major. So I'm joking, kind of, but I'm just so passionate about skiing. I'm like, change your major, work on that later, just get your ski training in. But anyway, that's how I sometimes am comical about it.
We had a rule in our house that on Friday, my son could complain about the coach, who was his dad, and he could say anything he wanted at the dinner table. And it was really surprising when he realized I'd listen, that he could have those discussions. And then he would start to tell me about things that he didn't like, or, like every other kid goes home and complains to their parents. And then anybody on the hill, he was handled by, we always believed in one voice so that the kids weren't confused. In our case, we have a lot of high school racing here and still CUSA racers. Well, CUSA is the more sophisticated, and the coaches are usually better. Then the kids would go back to their high school coaches, and some of them could snowplow. and you get this one voice approach to things. You try to settle them so that they can get to enjoy the sport and not get burnt out. But that's kind of the nature of amateur athletics in
Right.
this country. So one of the things I wanted to talk about and go back to the show. So you meet somebody from HBO, which is sort of the kind of opening the door. And I don't think anybody's going to confuse you with somebody being, sort of a wall child. You obviously got a great personality, which you have to have in the business that you're in. And so, are you just sort of a natural in when the first part of that television starts, and kind of walk us through how do you come up with SnowMotion? That's the name, and then sort of where did you start? Is it pretty much the development that everything you did on your own?
I really did. I had to, I wanted actually ski TV because I thought it was friendlier, but that was taken. And then I thought snow motion because everything's going to be in motion, and I could include other winter sports to broaden the topics. But yeah, I sell all, until this day, I sell my own advertising. I get the distribution, but I do love it. I love interviewing people on the chairlift, and I think it's just a great environment because you're just chatting with someone like you would on a chairlift naturally. And so it's not a staged interview, and they've been really successful. And I think it's great for a lot of the US ski team racers because they don't get a lot of exposure, and our audience, the US audience, doesn't see them a lot on TV. And we want to get these kids out there with their sponsorships and their headgear sponsorships. So anyway, I've enjoyed that and learning about the different athletes. And I just love it. I love my show. And so it's just like a little baby, but I did have to work a lot in terms of getting that distribution, and it grew and grew and grew. And yeah, and still continuing to find the sponsorships.
Now you're filming from January through March, which is this obviously
Yeah.
the ski season. You have about an audience in the 80 million range with all of the major markets as part of that. Do
Yeah.
you own the show yourself at this point then?
Yeah, I do on the show. I
Okay.
bought it from
So
Fox Sports.
when you Fox Sports was your first sponsor, correct?
Yeah, yeah. They were the one that was the network that aired the show. And it was a pilot. And then they continued, and it was just on Rocky Mountain. So that's Utah, Colorado, and Montana. And then they took the next step, and it went, to more regions, and more regions picked it up. And, now Florida is one of the most popular regions. They air it 4 times a week in Florida. So it's definitely grown. And yeah, but it's hard to, and then in my skiing with HBO, I would ski with a lot of their affiliates, and one of them was Comcast. So I would ski with the president of Comcast that owns now NBC Sports. And so when some of the affiliates don't go across all the networks, like I was missing the East Coast and Boston and Philadelphia. So I called the gentleman that I skied with, and I said, I need to get my show there. And so the next day, got my show. Now that's in Fox Sports New England and MSG and Fox Sports Florida, or NBC Boston, so I really do have every single region in the US right now. So wherever Fox doesn't air, it goes on NBC Sports.
You didn't have the ski celebrity you had as a ski racer. Would you have been as successful as quickly? Or do you think that opened some doors because you do have the cachet of having been a former All-American?
I think so. I mean, it gives me credibility of knowing what I'm talking about, at least on the slopes, and the credibility of being skiing with all the corporate events that I do, and I'm hireable to do that. So I think it's definitely helped me.
Are you PSIA? Just curious.
Say that again.
You PSIA?
No.
Okay. So your knowledge is just from the racing world and what you know about skiing.
Yeah, and being taught, and being coached.
Right. Well, obviously, it's
say a million years, but
coached at the highest level. So that, I mean, I get that part of it. So that's part of it.
And I've coached myself, at camps like you have with our good friend Bob Vail, and doing summers, and many summers in a row at Mount Hood, and all that, teaches you how to teach kids and people.
Now you do about 6 to 8 shows a year.
And I do get a lot done in the fall because it feels like the whole world comes to Colorado to train at Copper, and hopefully more in Vail in the future. But that's allowed me to have access to Lucas Brotham and Outline McGrath and Henrik Christoffers, and all the Norwegian clan was there, and the Austrians and Marcel Hirscher. I've been able to get some of these Oh, Petra. I interviewed Petra Vilova last year, right there in Copper training. And so it's just I've been able to get really up close and personal with all these top racers.
You obviously have somebody sitting behind us in a picture, Lindsey Vaughn, obviously
Oh
a
yeah, and
pretty
Lindsey
credible.
Vaughn. Yeah. I forgot.
You kind of
She was too
chose,
busy. That's when she was a competitor. And so I always gave the option of doing a chairlift interview in the summer because then, she was home in Vail at the time. So that makes it easier.
why the
So,
chairlift interviews, and then the second part. And I understand you said earlier that you're doing it because everybody talks to each other on the chairlifts, especially when you're out west with their longer chairlift rides.
right.
When somebody's really interesting, what do you're still stuck with a 6 or 7 or 8 minute window. What do you do when all of a sudden it becomes really interesting? And
It's terrible because then you got to lift the bar and get off. So I have a couple of things. I said, oh, please, will you take another run with me? And then sometimes I get them on the way down to do, okay, tell me what you're working on in your skiing and, do a tip with me and describe what they're thinking about when they're skiing. And so I get, some knowledge there. And then hopefully I get another run in so we can still cut that more information into the same chairlift interview. Like Phil and Steve Mayer, we went up one run in Vail and then I made them go up another run. So that because they were both talking on each other over each other and I needed more time. So I do that. And also if they don't, then we'll stop and pull over at the top and just kind of finish it there. So
you're
they're
talking.
always interesting and you never want to stop actually.
No, I get that. And you obviously have the passion of both loving skiing. So that's an easy, you have that common element.
It's been fun interviewing other aspects like Red Gerard. Have you heard of Red Gerard? He was 16 when he won the gold in half pipe in snowboarding. And he's from Silverthorne, Colorado. But, we were going up the lift and he was watching the other athletes go down the half pipe. And I'm like, Red, just focus no, just all these different things. And Alex Hall, who I said, well, what do you do for workout? And it's a whole different, he's doing like 20 flips in the air upside down and they don't have a workout routine like alpine ski racers.
Right.
It's just, he's just a string bean. It's just different. The whole, all the different disciplines in the sport. It's really fun to meet the other athletes.
Conversation. How do you shoot it on? Do you use what kind of a camera do you to shoot it on the chairlift? Is it you? Are you holding the camera, or is it you have a cameraman?
I put the athlete on the end and myself, and I have them smush out a little bit so that, and then I have a cameraman on this side shooting, and then I hold a GoPro, and so we get two angles.
It's amazing the equipment. No, but it's amazing the equipment. That one of the reasons we've done long form interviews is that the first 20 minutes as you get kind of past the bullet points.
Yeah.
Then you get the chance to have these.
Then the real stuff comes out.
Well, we did our second show. We get a chance to talk to both Phil and Steve Mayer. The conversation went an hour and 55 minutes. And I didn't realize, I knew a little bit, but I didn't realize how sentimental they are. So some of the questions we got involved, we had them in tears. And that was not the intent, just the nature of the beast. I knew his dad a little bit. So we had a chance to talk a little bit about Spike, their father, and how he ran the area. And that got him to reminiscing about being kids. And it was a really cool chance to have that conversation because they don't get a chance to talk about their dad that much. And how he got the name Spike. And it turned out to be the problem that they had with a chairlift. And how he was driving spikes into an old riblet. It was just a really kind of cool discussion, which is what you get a chance to do in a long form interview when you get it, when you have that opportunity, more of a podcast, a video cast from that standpoint. But when you're interviewing somebody on the chairlift, your head's got to be spinning 100 miles an hour while you're listening to them talk, knowing also at the same time you want to get out the 5 or 6 points that you had sort of planned that you wanted to make sure you have that conversation with.
Right.
So it's a real juggling act, and then make sure you don't fall off the chairlift at the end.
We have almost, because we brought the bar up too late because I got to try to close it, But yeah, we never can finish in one. I beg for another, and usually I can get it. Um, or just go all the way to the top of the mountain, because there's just so many things to ask them. And I also want them to share a little bit of sharing about their sponsorships and people that have supported them, and giving them that opportunity to give thanks to the people in their world that helped them be where they are.
How many hours of video for a 26-minute show? Ballpark.
Oh boy, I don't know that.
Okay. How long does it take you to shoot a 26-minute video?
Oh, that's a long time. But so like a chairlift interview, say that one's easy, because you're really taking the time on the lift and then getting a lot of B-roll of them to insert. But say if that's 5 minutes of a show, there's a lot more pieces involved. So yeah, the ski tip, the chairlift interview, the fitness tip, an event that's happened. We cover different events. And then also we put in a film of the week that's been really popular.
No, I get that. You've been on you've been on 25 years, is that right?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
I didn't want to admit that, but,
no, but I say it because the popularity of the program growing is the advent of cable growing as well, cable and streaming. And in a world where content is king, good content is even valued even more. The long form interview lends itself to a larger process, but literally pick up the phone and have a conversation. And it's not as difficult as it seems. But when content is king, that's been the cool part, is that they want good, solid information. And I think you provide that, which I think is kind of cool.
Oh, thanks, Greg.
You're stronger at ski tips or exercise?
Oh my gosh, these are tough questions. I would say ski tips. I would say ski tips, just because it's easier than walking for me, skiing, so I feel that my teaching skiing and helping someone become a better skier and be more confident is just, I can feel it in every cell. That just comes out naturally. And I just do it at the top of my mind. Okay, I saw someone doing this. I'm going to teach my tip and try to help the viewer. If they're dropping their hands, for instance, like last week I did when they turn and drop their hands, turn and drop their hands. And I see that, that you see that so much. And I was just, did a whole tip on just plant the pole, flick the wrist, leave it there. Don't, bring it down to your thigh. And so that's just something simple that keeps the weight over the downhill ski, keeps you in your athletic stance. And I try to show that by what happens when you drop your hand and takes you out of the takes you out of separating your lower and upper body out of the angulated position. Then you just kind of fall to the inside and lose the power on the downhill ski. And so I just went over that in detail, and it just comes out because I can feel it. So
we had Heidi Ettlinger, who's a big PSIA. She's from South Lake Tahoe, and she's coming around the world. She's coming into town here to do a couple things at Boyne Mountain. And we got a chance to have that conversation about PSIA and USSA. And I jokingly said, I had a hard time with PSIA all the time because I had a real tough time with a controlled slide. I knew how to edge my skis, and what do I want to slide them for?
Controlled slide, right.
And, but when I listened and watched your tips, they're really, again, we interviewed on our first show, Bob Vail, about the language of teaching and the language of skiing and the simplicity of that language. And as a writer, I take, you can talk about angulation to a 7-year-old. You can just tell him to put his right toe down and his ski turns. It's pretty simple, right?
Right.
That's been part of what we're trying to do with this. And when I watch your tips, they make sense. And you're not talking above somebody. You're talking at them. You're talking with them. And you can learn something. And I learned 3 or 4 things just watching through some of your tips. I think that's
great.
very humanistic, very to the point. And I think that's something that is probably why the show has sustained it's all of its time that you've been around doing it, because people listen. And I think that's important, because when you're watching it, you don't want to have to listen to something that you don't understand. Is that conscious? Do you do that consciously, or is it just the way you teach?
It's just the way I teach. It's more out of feeling and what it feels like, the feedback you get. Just like when I was skiing with someone that was afraid to go down the steeps, and it's just so counterintuitive. and they were shying away. That's down the hill. They were like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go there. So I'm going to turn away to slow myself down. So I had to explain, no, we need to face our upper body towards the mountain, like face our fears. And that will give us the edge control and give us that confidence. So we have control. If I go like this, I flatten out my ski, I lose control. So it was just going over that and just getting that reinforcement on not so much of a steep slope, getting her to face down the hill, getting her to commit, and ingraining that, and then going a little steeper, and then still committing down the hill with the upper body. And then she went down the steeps doing it with ankle, knee, hip in, upper body down, and it held. And she said, wow, I love that, because the feedback is that gives me edge control. And now I'm in control versus sliding and getting more scared. So I just get excited about changing, and it also making it's simple when that you do it like that, but it's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
That
You've had 25 years of interviewing celebrities and all kinds of people in the ski industry. And I think the typical question would be, who's the best interview? And I don't really want to ask the question, but here's the question I do want to ask. You're at a dinner party and somebody's going to ask you about your show. There's always going to be something in the back of your mind that there were some really interesting interviews, some people that were really, and it might not necessarily be the greatest or the worst, but any anecdotes about some of the folks you've interviewed that have really been, that have left you impressed with their premise of who they are?
Well, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but I just interviewed Andy Mill, and I thought he was really interesting. And looking back, because I said to him, you were, a rock star in the 70s, and downhill skiing did have a little more pizzazz, and he was good looking and long hair and kind of movie star status, and he just described that and that feeling and of him just going for it and all the injuries, but also now changing his career to tarpon fishing was interesting.
Let me ask the last question, because I appreciate your time. Two questions. One, what's up? What's on tap for 24? And are you filming as we speak? I'm assuming you are.
Oh yeah. I have to shoot next week.
Okay. Anybody coming on? Anybody of note coming on here this year?
I do. I have a lot. I'm going to do an interview with Tom Hackett. He doesn't know it yet, but he's one of the surgeons at Dr. Stedman. It's fixed a lot of ski racers. But wait, I wanted to tell you about this one. His name is Lucas Brotham. He won the slalom overall title this past year. And he retired. You must know him. He's the Norwegian superstar that decided to quit because of, but I think he'll come back because he has a dual citizenship between Brazil and Norway. But anyway, he was quite interesting, and I feel like he brought another dimension to the sport, very outgoing and talkative, and really reached out to get an interview, so I loved that. I think, all the different racers have different, like Petra Vlhova was very tight. And then she wanted to do another run because she felt her English wasn't good enough. So she wanted to explain it better. So, I mean, I love that they do want to make a good impression of themselves, but I love learning about all these personalities in our sport. And let me see, who else do I have? Isaiah Thomas. Isn't he he's from Minnesota, maybe, a young boy. Do you hear me?
Yeah, no, I hear you fine.
So he's in my first show of the year. And then I have a U.S. Disabled, what do they call it? Adaptive racer, young
right.
adaptive racer in the next show. So it's just I wish I could do more because I have so many I want to interview.
Absolutely. It's great to have this conversation with you. I can't tell you how much I've appreciated your time. We need more shows about skiing and certainly ski racing. And part of that discussion becomes we'll if you watch this, there'll be a couple of tips from you that we're going to broadcast with this show, with your permission. Certainly.
Oh yeah.
And you're just delightful, and I really appreciate the time that we spent.
Oh, Greg. Good luck to you. I can't wait to watch. I got to find this. And my son's girlfriend was a sailor for Dartmouth College, and we don't know much about sailing. And now I made another sailor.
Yeah, well, that's good. So listen, thank you for your time, and good luck the rest of this season, and hopefully it stays cold for a while, we can all ski.
Okay, come out and ski some powder in Vail.
We're always talking about making good carved turns, but this tip is all about a good transition. A good transition is important because it sets you up to make a good turn. At the end of my ski turn, I plant the pole, I move my hips forward, transfer my weight from my old downhill ski onto my uphill ski, which will be my new downhill ski, and start rolling it over to start pressuring it into the next turn. When I get to the apex in the fall line, I really want to stand on that downhill ski. But it's that transfer onto that ski, the gradual pressuring until I get to that apex when I really nail it. That beginning gradual pressure is important because it starts rolling that ski on edge. It makes for a smooth turn versus really pushing down all at once. Plant the pole, move forward. I release the energy off of my downhill ski and it goes into my new downhill ski. I want to make a weight transfer right onto that new ski. Another thing I think about when I'm in the apex of the turn to keep that power on the downhill ski is I take my rib and my hip and I push those two bones together, and that keeps me in a powerful position, pushing that weight onto that downhill edge. This tip is simply saying that when I'm done with one turn, I want to take that energy off my downhill ski and move it forward smoothly onto my new downhill ski.
Just want to take a couple seconds out and thank Brenda for spending some time with us. I think you'll find that her videos are pretty sharp, are pretty cool. Mother Nature is finally back, as you can see the snow coming down. We will hopefully be on skis again tomorrow. And for all the folks in back, we'll see you next time.